been dying to do this episode because it's all that anyone's talking about, and I'm all about it, which is Trump's arrest in Georgia and his mugshot. That mugshot, Tara, have you seen it?
Oh my God, Stephanie, that was a great mug shot, wasn't it? I mean, that is
Yes.
that is a straight up fuck around and find out kind of picture. And it's honestly going to be the most notorious picture that Trump has ever taken. I was reading an article in the New York Times that described it as, quote, the de facto picture of the year and an historic image that will be seared into the public record and referred to in perpetuity, the first mugshot of an American president. And I think it only took like what, 10 minutes after that picture was made public before it went viral. And I love that the Trump campaign jumped on it. They immediately started capitalizing on it. They released a shit ton of merchandise with his mugshot, like t-shirts, coffee mugs, beer koozies, you name it. And it's pretty cool because it all has his mugshot picture and taglines like never surrender and free Trump. And like he's going to make a fucking killing from this. And that makes me happy. And
Me
aside
too.
from like, yeah, I think it's great. And aside from all of the official Trump merchandise, you've got people all over the country that immediately jumped on this bandwagon, started selling Trump mugshot items online. Like I've even seen wrapping paper. And I really think that this arrest is going to be a turning point in terms of voters like opening up their fucking eyes to the tyranny and corruption that's going on in this country.
Okay, I need to get some wrapping paper.
Right? I know.
We should probably make some merch. Like,
No.
I mean, he called it though. He was saying for a long time that he wants his mugshot because it's going to secure his win, and I think it will. And I mean, man, like he looked like a all-American badass. Like
Yeah.
that was a badass picture. What I did not realize until a couple days ago was that this arrest would flip a huge portion of the Black voters to become Trump supporters. And I realized this going through our TikTok feed. I am not kidding you when I say every single post was from the Black community explaining why all Black people should vote for Trump, like everywhere.
Yeah. And I saw a lot of similar posts on Instagram too.
Yeah. And I think the message is just crystal clear. Like they saw Trump getting arrested and being fucked over by the government, just like the Black community has been fucked over for generations and generations. And I think it clicked that Trump is one of the good guys. And that's why they will do whatever it takes to keep him out of office. And I think that mugshot too, like really just got to everyone. They saw
Yeah.
that and it was like, okay, like this is real. And surprisingly, I think that the turning point was actually when Trump was driving through a Black community on his way to the jailhouse. There were all of these people posting all over social media how Trump is in our hood, and they all lined up and cheered him on, and they were chanting, free Trump, free Trump. And Tara, like, this is not something we've seen before. Like, we have seen the few people, that are public supporters of Trump from the Black community. They're being called all sorts of racial slurs by the left. And it's just been this thing that the left has like taken for granted. Like, no matter what, they're going to get the Black vote. And if there's a person that isn't going to vote Democrat, then they're going to go after them publicly. Well, I don't think that they expected that this arrest would wake up the entire Black community to like the real corruption going on in the government. And that corruption is what Trump is fighting against. And I think that people are finally realizing that. So they arrest him, just like, so many people in the Black community being arrested and thrown in jail for petty crimes. Just look at Kamala Harris, who threw all these people in jail for like marijuana charges, or Biden, who fought for hard time over small drug offenses, even though his son was a crack addict. And still is, right? Yeah. Coke in the White House.
Allegedly.
Yeah. I came across an article that I want to read some of it. It's by a man named Craig Scott, and he wrote this in Newsweek, and it sums up what I think a lot of people are feeling. So he writes, quote, in the early 90s, I was a militant activist and bank robber. I saw myself as a Black Robin Hood, stealing from white-owned banks to fund Black cultural events. I was caught and sentenced under then Senator Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill to an unheard of 52 years, though I was a first time offender and no one was hurt during any of my robberies. And I was released by Trump's 2019 criminal justice reform bill called the First Step Act. Thanks to Trump's prodding of Congress to reverse many of the draconian laws written and supported by our current president. The former president freed 5,000 incarcerated people like me from outrageous sentences. Yet he is now facing the possibility of serving a sentence of his own. As I watched former President Donald Trump get perp walked and mugshot at the Fulton County Jail in Georgia, I couldn't help but notice the deep irony. The same criminal justice system that Trump made radical reforms to is now being used to discredit him and hamper his chances of winning the presidency for a second time. None of us who have benefited from Trump's radical reforms of the criminal justice system under the First Step Act are blind to that irony. But it goes beyond that. Trump's repeated run-ins with the law and what seems like an unfair obsession with catching him and punishing him disproportionately for his so-called crimes reminds a lot of us of what was done to us. From where I'm sitting, the events of this week will only increase Trump's street cred, especially among formerly incarcerated voters, end quote. And another interesting part of this whole Georgia case is that the director for Black Voices for Trump is held in jail without bond. So, I read this and I'm thinking, okay, he must have done something like really heinous since he's the only one that's being held without bond. But looking into it, he's accused of pressuring a poll worker to admit to committing voter fraud. So let me get this right. The poll worker admits to committing voter fraud, but the guy that questioned this person is the one that's sitting in jail. And funny how, it's the Black guy who made a film, Voices for Trump, is the only one who's not released on bond.
Yeah, I looked it up because I wanted to know what happened with this guy because I was kind of curious to know the details of his charges since all 18 of Trump's co-defendants were arrested on honestly pretty ridiculous petty bullshit. So this guy, his name is Harrison William Prescott Floyd III, and he's a 39-year-old former Marine and martial arts instructor, and he helped run Trump's 2020 campaign outreach to Black voters. And in this instance, he was charged with racketeering, conspiracy to commit false statements, and influencing witnesses. And this was in relation to working with two other guys, Stephen Lee, who was a pastor from Illinois, I believe, and Trevion Cuddy, who was a publicist. And apparently, together, they allegedly harassed this Fulton County election worker, Ruby Freeman. And supposedly, Lee asked Floyd to be the one to contact Freeman because Lee said she wouldn't talk to him since he's white. And so apparently, according to an article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, in addition to these charges filed against him in Georgia, he also faces simple assault charges in relation to another Trump witch hunt by the U.S. District Court of Maryland when the DOJ was investigating Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. So I looked up this arrest, and this happened back in February. And apparently at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of press coverage. But according to the Washington Post and an affidavit filed in the U.S. District Court, FBI agents went to Floyd's apartment back on January 23rd to serve him with a grand jury subpoena related to this case with the 2020 election. And when they showed up at his door, Floyd allegedly started yelling at them about how he was home alone with his daughter, taking care of her. And he repeatedly asked if they had evidence of a crime. And at one point, he allegedly squared up with one of the agents in a way that the affidavit described as him being, quote, chest to chest with the agent. And he allegedly bumped the agent with his chest and the agent got knocked backwards. So that's where this assault charge came from. And it's being described in the affidavit as, quote, attacking the agent. And there's a lot of details in this affidavit from the FBI side, basically saying they were trying to serve the subpoena, and Floyd responded by saying, quote, "You haven't shown me a badge or nothing. I have a fucking daughter. Who the fuck are you? I don't even know who you are. You're two random guys who are following me up here into my house with my daughter. You're not showing me a fucking badge. You haven't shown me shit. Get the fuck away from me." And while this is all ongoing, at one point, they're talking to him while he's in his apartment with his daughter, and they're like following him. So he shuts the door, and one of the agents manages to like wedge the subpoena in the door frame as the door is closing. So allegedly they leave, and then Floyd comes back out of his apartment, and he, quote, rushes towards the agents and jabs a finger in one of their faces and starts yelling at him. So the other agent goes for his gun. And so Floyd backs off, goes back in his apartment, and he calls the police. And he basically tells the police that two men in suits aggressively approached him, threatened him, and tried to follow him into his house. And he had no idea who they were or what the subpoena was. And he didn't know if they were reporters or whatever. So then 3 months later in May, he gets arrested and charged by federal authorities. And according to court records, he was released on his own recognizance, but conditions were that he had to surrender his passport and not violate any federal, state, or local laws while he was out on bond. And then surprise, surprise, here comes this second investigation. And
This
so I'm
is just
guessing
so
that's why.
upsetting. And like, okay, as a former police officer, you could probably tell me, I thought that they have to show you a badge to prove, because again, like he was saying, how would he know that they're not just some reporter trying to get in his home?
Well, from what I read from the FBI statements, they did show him a badge and he refused to look at it.
Oh, okay.
So
Really? Well, I just think that when we look in review of everything that this administration has done, I was trying to figure out, is there any group left that this administration hasn't pissed off? Like, I mean, I'm thinking maybe pedophiles and gender transition doctors might still be in support of this administration. But other than that, I mean, they're pissing the whole world off right now from the way I'm looking at it.
yeah, except for the, indoctrinated youth.
Yeah.
But I did read an article in Reuters from August 1st, and it was talking about how polls are showing that Black voters are losing faith in Biden and in the Democratic Party as a whole. And one of the people who was interviewed was a 28-year-old Black male in Georgia named Bada McConan, and he voted for Biden in 2020. And he said, quote, what I'm noticing across the Democratic Party right now is a lot of pandering to the Black community. It seems like they try to do that a lot to make it seem like they're the party for young Black men or Black men as a whole, but they don't back it with anything and they don't follow through. And then another comment came from a 33-year-old political campaign manager named Leland Evans, who stated, quote, Democrats need to understand there's a growing population, especially with Black men, who are reaching the point of being fed up with always being pushed over and looked over. And then according to Terrence Woodbury, who is the chief executive officer at a company called Hit Strategies, he said that Democrats are favored by Black voters who value abortion rights in opposition to racism, but that this margin is shrinking when it comes to the economy. And he said, when you look at economic issues like economic security, inflation, and job security, those 50 to 60 point gaps start to shrink to near parity, where you have young Black folks saying that Republicans are almost as good for them on the economy as Democrats. And then another person who was interviewed in this article, Julian Silas, a 25-year-old Black investment research analysis from Chicago, he said that a lot of his friends and family are starting to re-examine their politics and questioning just how much the loyalty of Black Americans to the Democratic Party has actually bettered their lives. And he said that, even though Democrats continually talk about bettering Black lives every 4 years during the election process, like nothing really happens. And then a couple months ago, back in June, there was an article on governing.com, and it was talking about how Biden basically, the only reason he got elected was because, Black voters in South Carolina fueled his primary win there. And that's basically how he got elected, his whole fucking, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black campaign.
Right.
But the article was talking about how even though Biden's made all these claims about, unemployment for Black Americans has reached a record low this year. Well, there was a recent survey from the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies that found 74% of Black people say their personal finances have either weakened or stayed the same over the past year. And another recent poll found that Biden's approval rating among Black adults dropped down to 58%. And another poll found that 27% of Black voters would definitely or probably vote for Trump over Biden. And interestingly, the article also stated that the Democrat share of the vote among Black men has slipped with every election since Obama's reelection in 2021. So, yeah, I do think Black people in this country are starting to truly see that the Democratic Party doesn't do shit for them. And I hope this surge of Black Americans speaking out in support of Trump continues to grow.
Yeah, I mean, Biden got so much support, especially from celebrities
Yeah.
in the Black community. But it's a great question. Like, what has he done? And, okay, like everybody, whether you're Black or white, is hurting right now because the cost of everything is more expensive. And then, look at every single liberal led city and state. The crime is out of control. It
Yeah.
looks like shit. The so many schools, the reading and math levels are completely,
Mhm. Third
insufficient.
world cities. They're
Third
like,
world cities.
yeah, but like third world cities in a fucking sci-fi horror film.
Yeah. And, the other thing is like these cities, like Baltimore, for example, they've been given billions of dollars
Mhm.
to revamp these Black communities and build new buildings and new schools. It never happens. Why? Because it goes in the pockets of the people who are friends with the liberals. And I've been wondering for a long time, like, doesn't anyone see this? I mean, they really don't. They talk a big game, but they don't follow through with it. And Trump in his 4 years did. He took a lot of different actions, and that First Step Act helped a lot of people in the community. And, we keep saying like there's this cultural shift happening. I think that this arrest was the tipping point, and now it's turned into a full cultural revolution. So it's like, in my opinion, this is kind of like the civil war that everyone keeps talking about, but it's not with guns. It's with social media. It's with people who have been silent but are speaking up because they're fed up. It's with these groups who were against Trump and now are starting to show up for him. And there are multiple people at the top of the music charts for songs that go against the political establishment. And I just feel like Trump is like part of the cool club now. You know what I mean? It's like woke companies are hurting. You have Larry Fink canceling this whole ESG thing. Trump has created this movement. Like he is a force. And every single time they try to stop him, all it does is add more fuel to the fire and more people support him. And
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start calling him the Phoenix.
oh, I like that.
Phoenix rises from the ashes every time they fucking throw fuel on the fire. Like that Trump's the Phoenix.
We need to make a t-shirt with his mugshot and then that on there. And, like I was thinking about it, and I think if he would have won in 2020, it actually would have hurt him because it's like the way things were at the time. I think it took some of these drastic things like Biden coming in and completely screwing the economy and, arresting Trump for people to really truly see who the real bad guys are. And, people are always talking about like, oh, we need to unite. And I used to think that uniting the country would be something that happened with like a nice guy, like, Vivek or someone like that. But now I realize the thing that unites us is not being nice. It's standing up to the corruption, to the political establishment, to not taking any more of this bullshit. And it's not about Democrats or Republicans or Black people and white people. It's about the people, the Americans versus the establishment. And that is what Trump symbolizes. And at the end of the day, like we've all been fucked over by the establishment, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point of why we started this podcast in the first place and what we've been saying from the start. Like, this is not a left or right, Democrat versus Republican issue anymore. This is about uniting the country against this totalitarian administration that truly doesn't give a fuck about any of us, no matter what political party we affiliate with. And the past few years of this consistent witch hunt against Trump has just exposed this unprecedented level of corruption and the two-tier justice system in our federal government, and showing that this applies to everyone in our country except for the elites running the show. I mean, think back to how many people were like, Trump can't get arrested. They can't arrest a former president. Like, this is never going to happen. And then you see all these lies exposed, from the Hunter Biden laptop on forward, the whole Russian collusion hoax, everything, like this has been the government targeting this one man for years. And now that has branched out to not just him, but his associates, where you have these 18 people that got arrested as co-conspirators in this trial. Look at the people from the January 6th, you know, that are still in fucking prison, that still haven't even been given trial dates. Like, this is not just about Trump. This is a fucking attack on the American people. And it just hadn't been widely exposed until they started fucking with Trump.
Yeah. And it's like what he always says, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just standing in the way. And like, that's exactly what's happening. And we've talked so many times about how every time something comes out about Biden that truly is criminal, they go after Trump. And something else that came out this past week was about the timing of Trump's indictment and the arrest and everything just not adding up. And Tara, remember how they found out that the indictment was filed with the clerk's office, like before the grand jury even met?
Quote, accidentally.
Yes. Well, I want to play a clip really quick that I came across. So this is of Newt Gingrich. He was on the Charlie Kirk show, and he talks about something that he had heard through his sources. So let me play it for you.
This is hearsay, but I am told by a reliable source that Friday evening, somebody from Washington called the district attorney in Atlanta and said, "You have to indict on Monday. We have to cover up all of the mistakes we just made with Weiss." And she said, apparently, my jurors aren't coming back till Tuesday. And they said, "You didn't hear me. You have to indict on Monday." And she said, "Well, they're not going to get here before noon." They said, "That doesn't matter." She said, this means it's going to be 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night." They said, "It doesn't matter. We need the news media shifting."
Who made that phone call?
We don't know. And I'm telling you up front, this is hearsay, but it's from a person who has remarkably good sources.
I totally believe it, though, because that would explain why they leaked and they messed up on the clerk document, why she was exhausted, and why they had the 11 p.m. press conference, Mr. Speaker.
So if this turns out to be true, which I mean, it's Newt Gingrich, like clearly he has a lot of sources at the top. This will be the biggest collusion scandal our government has ever had, because we're talking about the highest office of government colluding to arrest an ex-president and lead political opponent faster than the law requires, all in order to take the heat off of Biden's bribery scandal and the whole collusion that's going on with DA Weiss. Like, this administration can't go an entire week without doing something corrupt. It is unreal.
Yeah, I know. And like, so what happens now? Because now that Trump has been arrested and that it's like a few weeks, I think, out until the actual trial starts. What are they going to do? Something else is going to come out in those few weeks. You know, what is it going to be? Another fucking climate change fire, or another explosion somewhere, or another Trump something or other? Like, there will constantly be, there's so
COVID
much
lockdowns, September.
The COVID lockdowns, right? There's so much fucking corruption in this government that like they almost can't keep up with creating manufactured crises to keep hiding what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah. Well, and the difference is now people are paying attention and they're getting their information from podcasts, from social media, from something other than the propaganda that the mainstream news is spreading. So good luck this time. It ain't happening. Like, people are waking up and aren't going to stand for it anymore. And I think that this arrest and that mugshot was a big, big fuck up by the Biden administration. So, all right, let's go, Brandon. We'll keep everyone posted on it. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing in the end. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Friday.